Hello, we are the Ninja Legion, and this is Saving Throw, our segment on all things tabletop. I'm Spider,
I'm D.
and welcome to our first segment. I guess the first thing we want to talk about today, there's a new dice game that came out recently called Dice Masters: Avengers vs. X-Men, and this is done by WizKids, the same people who did Quarriors, and it's a similar style game, but with a little bit of variation.
It's only 2 players. There are a few quirks with the battle setup compared to Quarriors, which make it a little more of an aggressive format where you can just constantly attack and not necessarily have to play defense as much, because it feels the enemies will come back to you if they die, which didn't really make any sense. As in Quarriors, where if they die, they just go back into your dice pool and you have to reshuffle them into your bag later.
I guess the other thing that makes it different from Quarriors, gameplay wise, it plays out mostly the same, but it's not strictly you buy a set, you have the dice, everyone goes out of the same pool. It's meant to be an expandable game through booster packs, where you can buy a booster pack, you get 2 cards and 1 die to go with each card. And then there's different rarities for different heroes, and then you can build your own force, and each person who plays brings their own force to the table, and they only buy out of their own pool.
Right. The requirement is that everyone has their own starter set, versus in Quarriors where everyone just
plays out of one game.
Right. But the additional dice, the additional players are very widely. They cover pretty much everybody. From villains to heroes on both sides.
Yeah, and there's some neat interactions between different types of cards and different types of dice as well. Like Iron Man and War Machine, different types of cards will function based off those, like those War Machines that have higher stats or become unblockable if you control an Iron Man at the same time. There's a Doctor Doom that weakens all non-villain characters, which is sort of neat. It's kind of a hard game to come by right now. I guess WizKids didn't produce enough of it, so getting your hands on a starter can be a little tricky. I was lucky enough to have one at the one store we go to, Expanding Universe. They put one aside for me when it came in, and even right now trying to find boosters is a little tricky as well.
Yeah, I haven't been able to find either. I've looked online. Although I did find 1 or 2 on Amazon, but they want it nearly double the price.
Yeah, I think like for starters, I've seen them on eBay for like $40.
Yep, that's about the going price.
Like MSRP is like $15.
Yeah.
So that's I guess the downside to it right now. Hopefully that's going to be a problem that changes in the future. I don't know where they see this game going.
Well, they do have an expansion coming out in November. I forget the title of it, but I think it's more Avengers stuff. But
okay.
They are releasing an additional starter expansion that will be coming out. But I'm hoping that they've fixed the problem from this previous starter set and realized, a lot of people want this, so we got to make a bunch more, versus making so little and then having them sell out and people wondering where they're at.
Yeah, I guess part of that, it creates this like sense of like, it's really hard to get, like people want it more when they can't have it, sort of thing. But I think that, like, especially when it's a game that requires starter set to play,
right,
they should have spent more time making just starter sets initially, rather than boosters and starters to come out simultaneously.
Right. I mean, it's not a bad idea to put the boosters out at the same time, but not have so many as to where you
can't produce enough starter sets.
Right, because they're so focused on the boosters that people will just will run out of the starters, and then it's like, we're left with boosters, but you can't play.
Yeah.
So.
But it was a pretty fun little play where we're getting used to it a little bit. Like I said, I was able to get my hands on a starter and picked up a few boosters to augment it.
Which you can play. You can play 2 players with a single starter set. You have to just play a little bit differently instead of playing. From the giant mass of the starter set, there's a bunch. Couple dozen heroes to select from. That
yeah.
You actually you sort of can do it like a draft where you set all the heroes out and each player you go back and forth and pick your heroes.
Pick heroes. You set like a certain number of dice, which becomes your life total in it, and play around that way. And that's what we did a couple of times. We did a draft, and then
And Iron Man was fairly broken.
Iron Man, yeah, there's one Iron Man just way too strong for being as inexpensive as he was to purchase initially. But So yeah, it's a neat game. I'm curious to see what's going to come of it once we get our hands on more dice for it, more cards, more heroes, and be able to actually fully flesh out a game instead of just operating with limited pool that we have now.
Right.
So that'll be something we'll probably talk about again in the future, is go back to that game. Being a comic book nerd like I am, it was just one of those like, comic book based game, here's my money, just take it.
Just take my money.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Because Legendary's fun too, but the wait between expansions, and
right,
we've
sort
played
of
that a lot.
Right, and we're waiting for the new villains Legendary to come out.
I think comes out in July,
which will be awesome.
Yeah, so it's only another month away, but we'll probably get delayed because that's happened a bit. The Spider-Man expansion got delayed too.
A couple months, yeah.
So we'll see what happens. Maybe it'll come out sooner. Maybe it'll come out later. But yeah, that's been pretty fun so far. I guess one of the other big. I probably should ask you. The new Magic the Gathering set came out this week.
Conspiracy.
Conspiracy.
Yeah.
Did you have a chance to do any conspiracy drafting over the weekend?
No, I haven't. And part of the reason is because I feel the set's too gimmicky. That I'm a heavy drafter. That has been my format since I started playing Magic back when I was 12. And I just it felt like they were trying to put too much into a set and have it be, there's so much bookkeeping in the set. You have to keep track of cards, colors, what your opponents select, that it seems a bit too much. And because it's a multiplayer format, that the tournaments that are going to be run, how would you even do them? And how would you do them reliably? From what I saw at one of the local game shops, that they split them up into groups of 3 or groups of 4, and then they pick, the winners from those groups would get the prize, and a couple of the people decided to actually split their prize with the rest of the table instead of taking it all for themselves. They just said, here, let's just give it to everybody. But the other problem with the set is that they've printed a lot of legacy staples for Magic, and people are just drafting it just to get the legacy staples, like Stifle, Exploration, stuff like that, and it's making the value of those cards go back up, which I thought they would come down because they're being reprinted, but people are just doing it just to get those cards and not actually to draft the set.
Yeah. I did talk to somebody today about it. They actually did get a chance to participate in some of the events over the weekend, and they said it's not as bad as it initially seems. Bookkeeping isn't too terrible. Like, you do need to keep a notepad and a pen with you for certain things. So there's like a card that require, like, the person who when you pick it, the person who passed it to you, it then has to always attack that player if you're playing a game with them.
Okay.
It's like a Juggernaut, like a 4/4 for 4 type creature.
Yeah.
But it always has to attack that named player, so you have to keep track of who that is. There's
Right.
cards with, like,
Cards that one of the rare lands that when you select it, the player to your left chooses a color, you choose a color, then the player to your right chooses a color, and you have to keep track of those colors. Some of the conspiracies require you when you choose the conspiracy, you have to keep it. You choose a card secretly, and you have to note that and someplace that your opponent can't just look at it. So it's multiple levels of players can be seen it versus secret.
Yeah.
So.
The good thing with what I had initially heard is it was going to be a limited release set, like the Modern Master set that came out last year.
Right.
And it's not. Wizards of the Coast has said that they are going to continue to print it with demand. So when stores sell out of it, they're going to make more because it's something that's intended to be drafted.
Right.
It's not something that's strictly just I need cards for something.
Right.
And I get that there's like the legacy staples and stuff, which is nice for players to obtain. Some of them aren't too bad. Like Brainstorms are like printed at common in it.
No, I know.
So they're not too terrible.
No.
But there are some exclusive cards to it, which drives those values up a little bit more.
No.
But hopefully with them being able to print it to demand and not have it be a limited release set, it'll be a little bit easier.
How much was the draft?
I don't recall the price. I know box prices aren't too exorbitant. I heard it's like $120, which is
that's standard
average for a booster box for Magic.
Right, but it's also less boosters. It's not a standard 36 booster box. It's less than that. I think it's just strictly draft set, so I think it's just 24.
24. Okay. Yeah. So it's a little bit more expensive, but not super.
It's not Modern Masters prices where you're paying $300 to $500 for a box.
Yeah, that's also true. So that I guess that was the big thing the other big thing that came out this week was that. So touch base there a little bit. I guess another big thing in tabletop gaming lately is 7th edition for Warhammer 40K just came out a couple weeks ago. haven't actually had a chance to play a game using the new 7th edition rules, mostly because I don't feel like spending the $85 for the rule book. And my grief with that is that they give, and I know they've done this with every other core book that's come out thus far, is where there's a chunk of it that's just pictures of models, a chunk of it that's fluff, and then a chunk of it that's rules. And at least in this iteration, they break them up into 3 separate books. There's a book for rules, a book for model pictures, and a book for the fluff. The problem is like the last version of the book was like $60. This one's $85.
Right.
And it clearly is like, we've printed each section separately. So why, if you want just the rules, can you not buy just the rules?
That's Games Workshop for you.
And
all the prices are going up. All the stuff they've been making is changing.
It's been a little lateral thus far. They haven't had across the board price increases in a little while.
From 5th to 6th they went up, but 6th to 7th, because it's only been a couple years, it's understandable they're not going to jump.
They haven't done
prices,
a huge jump.
You know?
I mean, they are putting a focus on larger models and bigger kits, and now each book that's come out, we've had this new big monster that comes in.
That's because they're pushing for Apocalypse.
Yeah, a little bit for Apocalypse, or things that are sort of just below the Apocalypse level.
Right,
but they've even gone so far as to incorporate Apocalypse into the standard rules of the game now.
Right.
Where it's not like this rare event that like you have these massive games, but you can incorporate the huge war machines of an Apocalypse game into a regular game.
Right.
Mind you, you're spending a lot of points for it.
Right, but if you want a Bane Blade and just want to absolutely wreck people with it, you're very welcome to do that. The one thing I do like in 7th compared to all of the other editions is the fact that they now have unbound armies. Now you can play with anything you want. You're not restricted to any specific army. You're not restricted to certain characters. You're not restricted to, you can do whatever you want. If you want to play Tyranids with Necrons, if you want to play Orcs with Space Marines, you can do whatever you want now. And I think that's a little nicer because some players don't invest tons of money into one giant army where they'll play just Space Marines, just Chaos. They'll maybe have a couple small armies, a couple 500-point armies, and they can't play anything larger than 500. Now they can put those two together, play a larger game, and still have the same experience, but be able to, have a little more interaction between the different armies.
Yeah, and that's something that's good for like the casual players. For tournament players, and what they'll do with tournaments for that is that whoever's going to operate the tournament will set the parameters for your army building,
right,
what you're allowed to build with, what point values and stuff, which is a pretty standard thing. So some tournaments may require you to have a what's the term for
formations?
Yeah, like using the proper force organization.
Right. Yeah, it's formations. You're stuck with your primary detachment,
HQ,
and then 2 troops,
and then build out from there.
Right, and they did change the allies table a little bit, but now under the allies rules, there's no longer all of the Imperial
Battle Brothers.
Well, they kept those, but all of the Imperial forces are now lumped together. So before in 6th edition, you could field Tau and Space Marines together, and they were, I think, on Battle Brothers level. But now they're actually considered desperate allies.
Okay.
Because they lumped Imperial Guard, Space Marines, all of the separate chapters.
Yeah, and there's a lot of conflict between the Imperial Guard and Tau.
But in addition to that, under the new rules for allies, that you can take Tyranids, which couldn't ally with anybody in the original set. Under the allies rules, you can take Tyranids and ally them with anybody, but you have to keep them, I think, like 10 inches away from your enemy or from your allied army. They can't interact with each other. If they close any distance, you have to start rolling dice for them starting to shoot at each other or attack each other. But again, it also allows you to open up where if you need some kind of force that's just close combat to charge around and capture a flank, and you just want to use your standard, your heavy artillery and stuff to move up the other side, you can do that as long as they're a certain distance apart.
Yeah. I guess one of the other things, the flying monstrous creatures, they changed the rules a little bit on that. Now you can't just shoot at them in the air a bunch of times and then thump them to the ground and kill them. Now it's much harder to do that.
Right.
It's just once per, shooting at them, not for every single shot that hits, which is a little bit
Yeah, but how many flying monstrous creatures are there nowadays?
I mean, there's, Chaos Demon Princes with wings, Greater Demons that have wings, all the Tyranid monstrous creatures.
Right.
I don't know what else they're going to do with that. There's possibility, I guess, for, Dark Eldar to get something like that.
No, that's what I would
When they
think.
eventually redo that book.
Right.
There's not a ton of flying monstrous creatures, but it's an option.
Right.
And it's something that's posed an issue in certain things.
True.
But the armies that have access to them aren't top tier armies anyway.
Like Chaos.
Chaos isn't a top tier army. Nids aren't a top tier army. Because they've made it such a shooting game in 6th and 7th edition, it's, Tau and Eldar have pretty much just been dominant in the tournament scene.
And now I actually think Eldar are probably going to get even more dominant because of the new psychic rules, that you can just absolutely obliterate your opponent with psychic powers, versus in 6 where you could have an Imperial Guard force of 30 dorks, and you just have to roll 1 die, and if you roll a 6, you just completely negate their strongest power, but now you have to invest a lot into negating the enemy psychic powers.
Yeah, they've changed the psychic rules for Warhammer 40k to be more like the magic rules for Warhammer Fantasy.
There's now the psychic phase between the movement and shooting phase.
Yeah, just like the magic phase in Warhammer Fantasy, there's a pool of dice that you get to use your psychic powers, just like the magic pool in Fantasy. So they've made some modifications there. I guess they wanted psychic powers to be a relevant thing.
Yeah, because in 6 they just got completely obliterated. So, but it's welcome. It's a welcome back to psychic powers, because I haven't seen them really be useful since back in 3rd and 4th edition, where they were actually fairly good. Other things that are going to be coming out, new orc stuff is being released slowly. There's a lot of pre-orders for stuff. They haven't given up the Orcs Codex yet.
Not yet. So far, this week we had the Gorkanaut or Morkanaut come out, which is their new beast, big stompy thing between the actual Orc Stompa, which was made for Apocalypse rules,
and the Killer
and
Cannon.
then the Death Dread.
The
Death Dread. It's a little bit larger. Apparently, it's a transport. It has like a chest cavity that you can things.
That's
they
kinda
sell
cool.
they sell a set now that's a unit of knobs and a Gorkanaut or Morkanaut. You can
and so you can just hide them in there and just
you can
sort of
hide
charge them
knobs.
up.
Yeah,
that's
it's
actually
a
really
walking.
cool. A walking
troop transport, which is a little different, which is kind of something cool for orcs.
Yeah,
it feels appropriate for them, so they don't just stomp across the battlefield, open up, and orcs will just pour out from inside of it. Next, they have pre-orders up right now for the new Flash Gits models, which have been needed. We haven't had Flash Git models in a long time. They're plastic. They're only like $5 to a box. Can't remember the price point on them. It's probably like
they're
$40. Or
yeah, they're at least 35. I actually looked a couple nights ago to see if they had released anything new, and nothing new. But they have been, Flash Gits in the Gargants.
Yeah, they're plastic. They look really nice. Yep. I do like the style of the models for the Flash Gits. They had a little bit more of that pirate flair that Flash Gits were supposed to have before.
Right.
So that'll be neat. I haven't looked at the new rules regarding those. I didn't get a chance to pick up a White Dwarf this week. But I'll look more into it, and really anticipating a new Orc Codex because they need it as a close combat army
against an entirely shooting
basically
rule
shooting
set.
game.
Yeah.
They need to have something to give them that extra little push.
Right. Or they're gonna be stuck in the same tier as Chaos and Tyranids and just be utter garbage for the next couple of years until they change the rules.
But that's something we'll keep an eye on and get back to once the Codex actually gets released, or once more units get released for that. Well, since we're getting towards the end of our time here, there was something that we wanted to bring up because we're actually going to be out and about doing some tabletop gaming.
Yes, we will.
Free RPG Day is coming in a couple of weeks, June 21st to be specific. We're going to be running some games at Expanding Universe, which is a comic book and game store up in Aberdeen, Maryland. So if you're in that area and you want to come out and say hi or sit down and play a game with us, feel free. We're more than welcome. I know I'm going to be running Weeby Goblins, which was a free RPG Day supplement from a few years ago.
I'll be running the new Pathfinder one that just came out. It's Egyptian.
It's something in Sands. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. But the cool thing with that, it's a preview of some of the new advanced classes that are coming out in the advanced class guide for Pathfinder, which I think comes out in August, so it's still like 2 months away.
Yeah, that's what the Swashbuckler and...
Swashbuckler was the one I couldn't think of. Swashbuckler, War Priest, Investigator, and Blood Rager. And they're all like hybrid classes. They take 2 existing ones and kind of smash together and you get a little bit of each in them, which is kind of neat. It's an alternative to strict multi-classing, which a lot of people have had difficulty with throughout like D&D 3.5 and stuff like that.
Yeah,
but
it seems it's too, you lose too much when you're trying to multi-class outside of, if you multi-class Arcane, you just lose everything.
Yeah.
So
So they have one that's the Arcanist, I believe it is, and it's a hybrid of sorcerer and wizard.
About
Which
time.
would be interesting. Yeah. So there's some cool stuff coming up with that. It'll give you a chance to try out maybe a new tabletop game, a role-playing game if you're interested, or So if you're in the area, come hang out with us, game with us a little bit. If not, find your local game store, go support them, go out for the day. A lot of stores do giveaways and stuff like that. Get your hands on a couple little free modules. It's something you and your friends might be able to check out and try. So, but that brings us to the end of our show for today. Hope you all enjoyed. Once again, we are the Ninja Legion, and this is Saving Throw. I'm Spider.
I'm D.
Thanks a lot.
Take care.